Welcome to VolleyTalk alongside Amir Snosson. I'm Elliot Skelly. Joining us today, Keith Kresge, second year head coach of the Bishop Watterson Eagles. Coach, how you doing?
Good. Just came off a pretty exciting five-setter with New Albany. Really skilled team, and we fought through it and got it in five. Each game was 2 or 3 points off. I mean, it was very, very close the whole time.
That's awesome. Always exciting, and especially against talented Division One teams. Of course, you guys are Division Two. So looking at the start of your season, you started off the year with a couple tight five-set losses to Gahanna Lincoln and then the newly D2 Mount Vernon. Now, despite being competitive, obviously the 0-2 start's never ideal. At that point, what did you see that needed correcting from your guys?
A few things. We've sometimes been height limited in the past. This year, we definitely have the height to you know, lock the net down a little bit more. So focusing on blocking, and then we were getting way more block touches, which meant, defense became a priority and just really trying to make the court smaller. Um, all the boys on our team and the guys we're playing against are so skilled these days. There was always kind of some overlap between athleticism and volleyball skill, but it is just crazy now how those two circles are right on top of each other. Um, so when you get guys hitting hard and getting lots of block touches and the ball just goes in any which way, in middles, we ride our middles a lot to close blocks. These guys are just too good to get any open seam. So, just adjusting when something breaks down into play and moving as a team instead of individuals just trying to do their specific job.
For sure. Now, you then rebounded with a couple successful try matches, defeating LaSalle and St. Vincent St. Mary before getting a great win over Alter in five. Finally lost to a talented Fenwick team in three. But what did you take away from those matches against some tough out-of-region competition?
Yeah, I've told our boys a few times that the really good teams are always going to score at least 20 points. And man, has that ever been true. So what's the difference between the teams that get to 25 and the teams that, stay at 20 or 21? And Fenwick, for example, all three games were identical. They just did the things they do very well. We still put up 21 points. We still were able to eat and, get our kills, get our points, get some really good defensive touches. But, they made a few more serves. They dug a few more hits. They made the court a little smaller than we did. So, we're definitely learning from the competition as well. Lots of teams do things really well and kind of emulate what their coach's skill set is. Like Gahanna, for example, we've played them twice now, and man, are they frustrating on defense. They just don't let you get anything easy. Um, so we're definitely learning from the other teams as well and other coaches.
And a quick follow-up to that, you're talking about, some of the great teams always getting to 20. When you're in a game like how you were tonight, when we're recording this, against New Albany, where you're going to have games just go the distance, how much does that type of competition help down the stretch? And how have you seen your guys grow through that?
Yeah, see teams like that, they really have their middle squared away. I mean, a lot of one teams you see them prioritize the middle, run things through the middle, run a quick offense, more stacks, more complex things with you know, good passing. So we're seeing that. Certainly D2 has the athletes to do the same. So it's blending together. And of course, those Cincinnati schools all beat up on each other, D1, D2. They just always have those games. And I think Columbus is definitely there as well. I mean, we've had no games this year where somebody just ran away with something. That's where I came up with that 20 number. I mean, we were very, very fortunate, and the boys definitely are. When we finally beat St. Charles, we love playing against them because you just know what you're getting. You're getting a skilled team, and also Sales and Hartley. Very fortunate to be in the CCL. We just make each other better, but they're always going to eat. They're always going to do things right. So get that delta and a couple extra points. Really trying to hammer that message home.
Now, looking at the CCL, you're 4-0 right now, and you talked about some of those competitions, those teams in general. How large does that goal loom to take the CCL in your mind as you look ahead to those matches in the next week and a half?
Yeah, it's always a top priority, developing the boys, making sure they get, the best experience and the most development they can. They're our customers, we get paid by the school, but, we kind of work for the boys as well. Um, yeah, right behind that is winning the CCL. I mean, league titles are always kind of that built-in expectation. And, certainly we feel the pressure being in a school like Watterson. I think we have 5 state titles this year so far. Football, girls soccer, wrestling. I think the dance team won the state title. I mean, it's just wild. Individual swimming titles. So it's a school with a not the top priority and only priority, but winning is, encouraged and expected at high level sports.
Sure. And to build off of that, I mean, with the great win tonight, you're 11-4, only two losses in Division Two. And no offense, but past few years we haven't necessarily seen you be as in the scene of state championship conversation in D2. Now, did you guys kind of surprise yourselves with that, or is it more like we know we're good, we're trying to prove it to everyone else?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of both. I think last year and the past couple of years, and we were very young. So two
Mhm.
years ago we had 1 senior. Last year, 0 seniors. This year, 7.
There you
It
go.
really does matter. The cohesiveness and the leadership from the boys themselves, where coaches aren't really directing everything. There's kind of more of a hierarchy, and those seniors and captains and leaders also bring that expectation with them, at practices and during the game where we don't even have to say quite as much, even in the 3 minute huddles between matches, seniors and captains are speaking up. So that was definitely part of it. And, as a newer coach last year, I was very impressed with the talent that we had and the skill that we had. And I probably didn't push enough to, close the gap in things that were missing, the blocking, the defense, kind of taking, things that needed work, fixing it, moving on to the next thing. Because that's what we've done this year, identified gaps in blocking and timing and communication on the court, fix that. And now with all those block touches, the ball is going, somewhere where it's not expected, and then filling in that defensive gap. And like I said, we pick up bits and pieces. I also have 2 great coaches helping me this year. I basically did it by myself last year. Had a Ohio State student helping me that was an awesome help, but he's trying to be a doctor, so
Yeah.
I told him boys volleyball is more important, but he disagreed. So yeah, a lot of good, really positive things happening this year. Great families, great school. We kind of have all boxes checked this year, so really looking towards the top of that hill.
It's awesome. Well, in Division Two, it's kind of no secret right now that it seems like all roads are going to lead to Archbishop McNicholas. Is that something you're aware of? Are you kind of trying to get a feel for them with any film, or are you more focused on your schedule?
Yeah, we tried to play this year. I've very meticulously planned our schedule, started early,
Sure.
looked at the teams that we would need to see. And they were obviously at the top of that list. Like I said, we're fortunate to get to see, St. Charles, DeSales, and Hartley twice per year already. But adding the Fenwicks and the Alters and, certainly working with Ned, Andrea, and Doug, to really leverage our location in Columbus. I think Ned mentioned it on his interview with you guys. We have a unique opportunity where the Cleveland teams and Dayton teams and Cincinnati teams can see each other before the playoffs and kind of you know get that first look at what they're going to have to deal with inevitably towards the end of the season and the playoffs. Kind of
Yeah,
a mystery this year, with some really good teams coming down to Division Two.
Yeah.
The number of boys came down in the school, but the volleyball talent probably
Right.
didn't proportionately, reduce. So we're looking at some really good teams coming down, and certainly Mount Vernon. I'm sure you guys have looked at their schedule. It is wild. So
Yeah.
playing all those good teams, it's that's why I said we try and take away a little bit from each team we play because everyone's doing things so well right now. The talent and the skill and the coaching, it's
yeah.
logarithmic growth, even just in the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I mean, not too long ago, Watterson's program made the state championship match in 2019, ultimately fell to Walsh Jesuit, and it marked the third state championship appearance for the program, but no titles though. So, one, do you have any type of connection to the Watterson program before taking over as a head coach? And two, is there a drive within your team and within your coaching staff to be that side to get the job done and to hoist a title?
Absolutely. I'm lucky enough to have one of the assistants be a senior from that 2019 team. So I've actually been an assistant coach. I used to travel a lot for work, long story short. So it was tough to be able to commit to a head coaching position. But I live within walking distance to the school. So it was a no-brainer. My buddy was coaching there at the time, Ryan. And, I wanted to get some more touches in. So I started coming to open gyms at the school, just getting to know some of the community there at Watterson, and ended up coming on as an assistant a few years before that. But that was a fun year. That was a nine senior year. They were all, best friends, and you could just tell it was something special with that team. And we didn't have a great record that year. We were playing a lot of really talented teams, and it was one of the three loaded St. Charles years where it was just like, oh man, we're so good, but look, look at what we have to deal with over there. And just had some weird energy towards the end of the season where, the things that weren't always a priority before just started clicking. We were getting blocks. I mean, our defense was spectacular. Like all the things that, you know, weren't really a priority before, we were very outside heavy, and, changing things up almost organically happening as well. Really got us some of those quality wins, and Alter was really good that year. That was the other, I hate to say surprising win, but it was a tough team that year. They, were right up there with St. Charles as the teams to beat in the state in Division Two.
Hey, peaking at the right time. That's all you can ask for. Well, hey, looking ahead,
Absolutely.
yeah, we talked about those CCL matches. You've also got a rematch against Mount Vernon, where if the regions fall the way we think they're going to, probably someone you might have to beat to get out of the region. Based on that first match with them, what do you think your keys for success are?
Yeah, they have some very long outsides, and they definitely picked on us down the line, um, smartly. But I think we've continued to improve as well on the defensive side and blocking. And I'm so happy we played them, our second game. It was really a wake up call. Like, okay, if you're going to be at the top of D2, this is what it's going to take. So our schedules really kind of helped build up to that. And um, we do play them again in the regular season. It's one of those things where just because of their location, if they're going to do a one-on-one with you, it's really expected that it's home and away, because they have to travel so frequently that we didn't. Again, if you're going to play really good teams, Mount Vernon's always on that list. So past couple of years, we've definitely been playing them at least twice.
Awesome. Well, hey, Coach, great win tonight. Best of luck this season. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, appreciate it, guys, and a bunch of us really appreciate this. The boys love it. They all share your Instagram posts and love the coverage. The sport's just growing like wildfire, and there's college money behind it, and it's really an exciting time to be coaching and still learning and still seeing the growth of the sport. It's nowhere near peaking, so awesome stuff.
100%. Appreciate it. All right, that was Keith Kresge, and then for the first time in Ohio VolleyTalk history, in-person podcast. It's pretty cool. Good to see you. Good to get a tour of Arizona State.
Yeah, it's definitely a good campus. Glad that you can make it out to Phoenix. I know it's definitely a little bit warmer. I would guess a little bit warmer than Tuscaloosa, definitely warmer than Ohio
Yeah,
around this time of year. But it's kind of crazy. We've been doing this now for 3 years, and we've never had that chance to really do that in-person podcast. I mean, you could consider Wittenberg for the Final Four, but
it's true.
logistics are another thing. But
Yeah,
glad that you could make it out here to Phoenix, and again, making history tonight.
it is a cool place. Club Volleyball Nationals. I will say I'm spending a lot on food. It's they price gouge you a lot. It's like
Yeah.
I want a cookie. It's 560. Like what? So they know supply and demand. Anyway, taking a look. First things first, regional alignments. So in Division One, nothing too big. Region One's pretty much the same as last year. It's like half Central Ohio. I think big contenders there. I'd say Pick North and Berlin, absolutely at this point. Region Two, looks like we've got Glen Oak, North, and Start being added into the mix. But again, that's just the Cleveland area. So likely same nations coming out of there. Maybe some challengers in St. Ed and Jackson. We'll see. Region 3, still the other half of Columbus. No changes there. looking at probably Thomas Worthington, maybe Jerome or Darby coming to challenge him. And then Region 4 is the South. We got Kings, Matt McLaughlin entering the mix, and then obviously GCL. So nothing too much there. Over in Division 2, quite a few changes. Obviously, all the teams coming down that we talked about. But Region 5 is still that Columbus area. So we still got, mainly the CCL, Carroll, and then we do have Mount Vernon that comes into that region. So some big things are going to come out of there. We had some other teams, Eastmore, Linden, McKinley, Tree of Life Christian, Unito, Walnut Ridge, all coming in there. Region 6 is going to be that Cleveland area again, so we would expect St. Vincent St. Mary to come out of there. Region 7, that's kind of, that extra region, the Northeast. So Independence coming out of the past couple of years. This year, Brecksville, Broadview coming down into that region. So from D1. So they've got a good chance coming out of there. Garfield Heights and St. Martin de Port also entering the tournament for the first time. And then Region 8 is at Cincinnati. We got Anderson, Indian Hill, St. Bernard, Elmwood Place, Summit Country Day, Turpin, and Wyoming all entering the region. And then, I mean, there is definitely a lot more competition, but it's pretty tough to say anyone but McNick at this point. So nothing too crazy, but those are new regional alignments.
Yeah, and I think that if there's anything that is crazy, Elliot, I think it has to be that Region 7. And
Hmm.
that's been the crazy region for the past 2 years, ever since OHSA took over. But I think Brecksville Broadview, again, a team that was in the Region 2 final against a team like St. Ignatius, they've been very well. And again, we've talked about this being a rebuilding year for them. They're kind of getting their footing once again, against some of these Northeast Ohio teams. They haven't been really good, but you take a look at that competition where you've got a team like Independence, you've got Chardon, again, teams that are used to being really good in that Region 7. It seems like we've had Chardon and Independence going at each other in the final for the past couple of years. Brecksville Broadview entering itself into the mix, and they might now be that team to beat and make it to the Final Four.
And the big news, I'd say, even bigger than the regional alignments, the state tournament draw. Now, remember, we talked to Emily Mason last year. This is random every single year. This is not on a rotation. So, based on, I forget how they like the bingo wheel, Region 3 versus Region 1. Again, the two halves of Columbus will play each other in the one Division 1 semifinal, and then Region 4 versus Region 2. So, Cincinnati versus Cleveland. So, that's pretty big. Yeah. So we'd like to look at like maybe an Ignatius versus a San X or Elder or Moeller, depending on how that region goes. And then the other way would be like pick North Berlin versus like a Thomas Worthington or a Jerome. So yeah, interesting there. Any thoughts on that D1
Yeah,
draw?
and I mean, it's kind of crazy when you look at the games this week, right?
Hmm.
Berlin and Thomas Worthington played today. That is on Thursday.
Yeah.
That could be a possible state semifinal. You could say the same for Ignatius and Elder, who met in the semifinals of the Elite Eight this past weekend. So there's so many different competitions. And again, the fact that it's random makes it kind of interesting because these were the same pairings that we saw back in 2023. And it was Moeller against Hudson and then Olin Tangi Liberty against Dublin Jerome. So some interesting battles there. And it was kind of an interesting setup as well. You know, we saw Moeller and Liberty really take charge in those semifinals. It'll be interesting, especially in that Region 2, Region 4 battle. If Ignatius, gets whoever makes it out of the GCL,
Hmm.
that could be an interesting battle. And then for Region 3 as well. Again, Region 1, we've talked about it being a work in progress, but that could also be interesting too.
And then Division 2 is going to be Region 6 versus Region 8. So that Cleveland region, likely St. Vincent St. Mary, going up against Region 8. We would think McNick. Obviously, there's still Fenwick in there, and a bunch of other teams. And then Region 7 versus Region 5. So, the Brecksville region in Northeast Ohio compared to Columbus, which yeah, I think Columbus is probably the one with the most parity right now. St. Charles, Watterson, Mount Vernon, even like DeSales could pull an upset. Like there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of parity there. So good stuff there.
Yeah, it's parody, but it's also a breather too, because we talked
Hmm.
about Brecksville Broadview, and again, they're not doing that good against some of these Northeast Ohio teams. Again,
No.
they're not winless, but it's not perfect for them, and that's what we've seen the Region 7, whoever wins that, they're essentially getting a really tough challenge against their opponent in that semifinal. And Region 5, knowing everybody who could possibly get that, Watterson, St. Charles, DeSales, so many different teams, Mount Vernon as well, like
Hmm.
it's crazy when you take a look at that Region 5, and essentially whoever wins that region to some extent is getting a trip towards that final. And then Region 6 and Region 8, an interesting battle there we're expecting that it could be St. Vincent St. Mary against McNicholas based off what we've seen over the past few weeks. And again, that's a matchup that we saw in the semifinals back in 2023. So a little bit of deja vu possibly as we take a look at these matchups.
As always, though, so we've got a long month before
Yeah.
those playoffs. All right, let's take a look at some of the matchups from this past week. First, that Friday night, we had St. Charles over Mount Vernon in 3 sets. So that's pretty interesting for Division Two there. And then obviously Moeller with a huge win over Elder in 4 sets. And that kind of flipped the narrative for us at that point. We're talking about maybe St. X is on the rise, but Moeller is definitely out of the conversation. And Elder's leading the charge right now. And then Moeller comes out, and it's like, whoa, just takes down Elder. And then I think, I was talking to Casey Pieper. One of the sets started 13-0. I mean, he just said they came out and like a different team, like they actually wanted to win.
That's kind of an interesting sentiment because we were just talking about Moeller against St. X and how they were really struggling at times. And
Hmm.
it was, really them where they were in a 13-5 hole or somewhere in that consideration. So again, credit to Moeller. And this is what the GCL is all about, right?
Hmm.
And we haven't seen the GCL really be a three-way race, in my opinion, since 2021, where, you have St. X, you have Elder, you have Moeller, and, you have a Bombers side that, yes, won the Centerville Elite Eight that year, but they end up going in towards the regional finals as a 3 seed. They have to take on Elder. That game goes to 5 sets. So those are the types of interesting matchups, Elliot, because especially in that region four, when we talk about this team, we've looked at the past few years, that 1 seed has gotten a pretty good convoy towards that regional final.
Yep.
But that 3-2 matchup has also been kind of interesting, but even the 2 seed tends to really have that advantage overall too. So it really poses an interesting predicament because of one, do we see those three teams go 1, 2, 3, which is something we haven't seen that much now.
Yep.
But two, can they also deliver in that 3-2 matchup again? If it's going to be an Elder versus a Moeller, like we saw on Friday, that could be an interesting rubber match.
Now, of course, not as much of an advantage as under the OHSBB. I mean, back in the day, if you were 1 seed in the South, you're basically going to state, and
Yeah.
then the other two GCL teams were there to fight it out. So you still got to beat a GCL team to get to state nowadays. But looking at those Centerville Elite Eight tournament, I mean, first of all, obviously we got to talk about the Moeller upset over Thomas Worthington. I mean, it was. All right, so we were there, right? I was watching Thomas Worthington, and it was like not even just they went up 2-0 to start. It was like laughably easy. I mean, I think it was 25-15, 25-14, something like that. I mean, it was like no contest, no stress. I saw Mueller at one point like had a quad substitution. Like I've never seen that before, just to like get people in. It was like no problem. So then I went to the main gym. I was watching St. Ignatius play Centerville. I was watching St. X play Derby. It's like, all right, those wrapped up. And then Elder beat Berlin, and it was like, all right, that's wrapped up. And then it was like, oh, Mueller won set three. I was like, really? Like that happened? Like, okay. And then before you know it, Muller's 1-5. And it's like, hey, I mean, you got to give all the credit in the world to Mueller. I mean, to go down 2-0 in like that Centerville Ox gym and to keep fighting and to come back, I mean, that was awesome. It felt like their middles weren't really in it the first 2 sets, and then they got going. Will Sauer got going. Penn started putting balls down. But I just, it was such a flip from those first 2 sets. I don't think I've ever seen a team in the span of a single match fall apart as much as Thomas did in that match. So I don't know. That was pretty crazy. But then we moved on. St. X ends up beating Moeller in a tight three. Elder ends up beating St. Ignatius in 5 sets in the semifinal. And then X ends up beating Elder in 3 sets and then takes Centerville Elite champion. Goes 9-0 in sets. Now, compared to last year, I walked away from last year's Centerville Elite Eight tournament saying there's no way anybody that's not named Liberty or St. X has any shot at a state championship. And despite the fact that St. X went 9-0 in sets, I don't think that's the takeaway this time around because even though it was 9-0, which is great and incredibly impressive, and they're absolutely number one team in the state, it was pretty dang competitive 9-0. I mean, all 3 sets against Mueller were like point for point all the way to the end. And Elder was a little bit more, but a little bit more of a clean win, but still like really close all the way to the end. So I think there's still like 5 teams, maybe 6 in the state that have a legitimate shot at winning a state championship.
Yeah, and I think the other thing when you take a look at that too, we've talked about that Centerville Elite Eight really setting the tone for what we see at the end of the regular season going into the postseason. But the other thing to note too is that St. X lost to Elder earlier this year.
Hmm.
So in essence, it's a 1-1 tie between them. They've got one more game coming up at St. X. If Elder can get that win on the road, we're possibly talking about them potentially being number one. Maybe Moeller enters itself into the conversation. Whoever wins the GCL, as what we've seen over the coming weeks or so, and what we've seen this past weekend, you never know what can happen. And again, it's worth noting too that ever since the pandemic, whoever has won the Centerville Elite Eight has not won the state championship. And again, St. X has found themselves in that category in 2021 and 2023. Elder just couldn't get it done in 2022, Liberty in 2024. So it always leads to some interesting nuances down the stretch. And that's one of the greatest things about Ohio volleyball.
Yeah, I don't really like getting into that. I'd say I always try to win, but that's just me. Anyway, so something I talked to the GCL coaches about. GCL's wide open now with Muller's win over Elder. I mean, if we assume that St. X continues on their track and St. X beats Elder, then they're tied up. And then if Moeller can come out and beat St. X, then it's a three-way tie. And everyone gets, and obviously assuming everyone beats LaSalle, then that's a three-way tie for the GCL, which is something we haven't seen since 2021. So again, we're starting to see that parity come back to GCL, which is cool to see. One thing I want to note, Elder, Sam Lutz. I had several coaches talking to me about him. He's kind of a dimension of their offense that wasn't really there in the beginning of the year. That's, he's a big part of their game now, so he's doing a great job there. And Ignatius losing to 5 to Moeller in that third place match. So still, really competitive day for them. And like I said, it's, yes, they got fourth, but they're still very much in it with 2 competitive 5-set losses. We also saw that day a lot of D2 action, but the big takeaways, I think, McNick and Mount Vernon both sweep St. Vincent St. Mary. So we're kind of getting the idea of the pecking order of Division II there. McNick Mount Vernon potential state championship matchup. We could see that happen. So yeah, good stuff there. And then that Sunday, Fenwick beat St. Charles in 5 sets. So St. Charles right there, but Fenwick's still a little bit better. I mean, pretty much consensus number 2 team in the state right now.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at Fenwick, and again, they're going up against McNick and GCL co-ed play, so
Hmm.
that also adds another wrinkle to what is already a really tough Falcon schedule and what's a really nuanced Division Two right now. But I think you take a look at Fenwick, it shows that they're able to play against really any region. And again, going back towards McNick, you see the pecking order, right? It's hard to you want to put STVM in that top 4, in that top 5,
Hmm.
because you know that they're going to at least be
Be
one
there,
of the
yeah. Right.
contenders to make it towards the Final Four. But at the same time, you still have to look back and say, you know what? Region 5 is just stacked right now. And Region 5 looks a lot like what we saw at a Region 8 a couple of years ago, where
Hmm.
you had a 6 seed Baden against a 5th seed McNick in the final. And then again, McNick able to play really well. That was a pretty young squad that year. And then
Was.
the year after that, they end up being state champions. So you never know.
And I'd like to remind the audience that squad only lost 1 middle and then they're coming back. So it's, yeah, going to be tough to see them not winning this year. But again, it is a long month until that state championship. We've also saw DeSales over Watterson in 4, which was a huge upset. I mean, it's tough to even know what to make of that because, I mean, we just interviewed Watterson's coach. They're obviously having a great year, but that's a costly upset for sure because with a win there, Watterson would have gotten guaranteed to share the CCL. Now, St. Charles and Watterson are both 1 loss, so that they'll both have their last matchup. Their chance at an outright CCL title will just be that match. So that'll be pretty cool to see. Some good CCL action there.
Yeah, and I think when you take a look at Watterson, they had a 4-set win against DeSales on the road,
Hmm.
and then they lose at home. And it's kind of a little bit of deja vu there, a little bit of evening out things, and it just shows what the CCL can do. And I think the other thing worth noting too is that they played New Albany earlier in the week.
Hmm.
They beat them in 5. It was a very gritty match. That's what Keith Kresge was talking to us off camera about.
Hmm.
And it was overall a game where we saw Watterson team was really battling against a Division I side like New Albany, who's been very good. And I think it's always interesting to see the fluctuations from like game to game, week to week, because it's so interesting when you have a Division II team going up against a Division I team. It's a
Hmm.
nothing to lose type game,
Right.
especially when you have those two, right? We usually don't fault a Division II team for losing to someone from that other division. And
Sure.
again, here we are, and it kind of shows you that it's really any given match day.
Hmm. So Thomas Warrington beat Berlin in 4 sets, so I didn't talk about it because of this result, honestly. But Berlin ended up beating Thomas Warrington in the fifth place match. So it was Berlin fifth, Thomas Warrington sixth. I was kind of my guess, but I think this kind of confirms it that that was kind of like a, I don't know, end of the day a low energy type match. But I do think Thomas is the better team. Pretty convincing win in four. I think they pulled stars in set three. So Thomas Worth sitting atop the OCC Cardinal. Going to be pretty tough for anyone except Jerome to potentially pull away. Jerome beat Derby in 5 sets. So if Jerome can beat Berlin later in the week, then there'll only be one loss, and then they can knock off Thomas Worth and get a share. So it's still something to look at there. Pretty light week outside of that. Tuesday, we got a Jackson Ignatius rematch. So Ignatius had a little trouble with Jackson right before their match against Thomas Worthington. Jackson took him to four, and pretty close four. Ignatius ended up getting it done pretty convincingly. So we'll see if they can, kind of avenge that, make it a little cleaner this time. But big for the North up there. And then Wednesday, that's the Watterson St. Charles match. And then Thursday, finally, we got McNick versus Fenwick, number one versus number two in Division Two, and GCL co-ed implications. So McNick beat Fenwick the first time around. Again, if Fenwick can beat McNick this time, you never know. Maybe McNick can take a loss or just take a share of the GCL co-ed. That's always a big win for teams.
Yeah, I mean it's always interesting, and it's a situation we saw these two teams face off last year. It was right after the Centerville Elite Eight. It was
Mhm.
Fenwick visiting McNick, number two against number one,
Mhm.
and it's kind of interesting and a good testament to both sides to what they've been putting up over the past few games or so. Again, Fenwick, you take a look at their schedule; they're going to have Baden before that, so a little bit of a warm up again, trying to take out the sting of losing to Elder in three. Again,
Mhm.
another tough Division One game.
Sure.
But then you have this matchup against McNick, which again should be really, really good and one of the best games, in my opinion, we should see in Division Two this year.
Definitely. And I mean, again, we talk about like these D2 teams, especially going to a GCL team in D1, it's like it's cool, you want to compete, but it doesn't really matter. I think that 2021 season, Fenwick ended the season obviously state champions. They won like 20 straight or something. I think Elder might have been their last loss. So it's like it's cool. Like it sucks to lose, obviously,
Yeah.
always, but I don't know. When you're at that level, it's not that big a deal.
And I mean, you take a look at that Fenwick team from 2021. I mean, they
Hmm.
were playing with a chip on their shoulder to some extent with Pete Ehrlich, their head coach, and
Yep.
the story behind them. But you take a look at their schedule too. They did beat Saint X in four, and that, I mean, as the voice of the Volley Bombers at the time, that was a very surprising result
Yeah.
at the time. So that
Yeah.
shows you a little bit about Division Two. And again, Baden did the same thing in 2022 with Anitra Brockman. So
Mhm.
you never know what can happen in those sort of situations, but that kind of gives you a little bit of a challenge or a little bit more momentum into a game
Sure.
against your Division Two, against your conference rival.
Absolutely. All right, take a look at our Division One rankings. Not a whole lot different. We both got Sanix at one. Obviously, that's pretty much a given. I put Moeller over Elder. Even though Moeller ended up finishing third, that Friday win, I think for me puts Moeller above Elder, and they didn't play at the Elite Eight. And then I had Thomas Worthington at four, St. Ignatius at five. Now, had Thomas not beaten Berlin, I think my answer would have changed a little bit. Just on Thursday, if they not beaten Berlin, my answer would change a little bit. But given that they did beat Berlin and kind of put that narrative to rest that they are a better team, I do think we can look back and see Thomas Worthington still swept St. Ignatius recently when both squads were at full health. So I think that's enough for me to put Thomas Worthington at four. Outside of that, the only difference comes to that 9-10 spot. Gahanna Lincoln, a team we haven't really been talking about, since this podcast existed. Regional semifinalist in 2021. But really, they're having a pretty good year. I think 10-2 right now, maybe 11-2. Only lost are to Pick North and Thomas Worthington. And swept Jerome. So that's something to look at too. Good enough for me to put him in my 10 spot.
Yeah, I mean, taking a look at the top five again, exit one. I think Elder, just by the fact of making it to the final, I
Hmm.
think should send some sort of message, right? Because
Sure.
we don't see the number one go down often, right?
Yeah.
We don't see, I mean, we were talking about it earlier with Thomas Worthington trying to maybe be number one. Obviously, they went down to Moeller, but
Yep.
still, I think the fact that Elder was able to get that win and Coach Tierney and crew were able to show what they're capable of, which I think is Elder's message this entire year, really, based off what we've seen over the past couple of years following that 2022 run. I think this is an Elder team that really wants a challenge for that number one spot. I think when you take a look down the line, I don't know what it is. Something about that Thomas Worthington loss just got to me.
Yeah.
We
Uh,
we expected them to be number one. we
Yeah.
had them at number one going into this tournament. And, it seemed like it was a little bit of a letdown in that regards. And again, you can kind of, compare Ignatius and Thomas. Again, Thomas did beat Ignatius earlier this year. So
Yep.
I get why you put the Cardinals above the Wildcats, but at the same time, it's just kind of interesting to see how Division One has unfolded. And again, Jackson continues to do some good work. Jerome as well, getting that 5-set win over Derby, continuing to build its resume
Sure.
in the OCC Cardinal. I think it's kind of interesting too because we take a look at those teams, right? We talk about Lakota East,
Hmm.
right? And East is a team that, they've won the games they're supposed to win. And again, Moeller and Elder, they're able to take, or rather, they lose to both of those teams.
Sure.
But you take a look at those two teams, they're 2-3, and you have a team like Gahanna Lincoln, who again struggled a little bit against Pick North and other teams. And that's where you kind of get a little bit of a sense of where do you draw the line between, it's a strength of schedule thing, they're playing well and there's some things working versus saying, you know what, they're winning the games they're supposed to win, and then you have these losses and you know, I don't know if those losses are enough to maybe put you in the top 10.
Yeah, and in fairness, I would say OCC Cardinal, the Jerome is playing is a lot more competitive than OCC Capital. I think Gahanna is playing, and there's not a lot of competitive
Yeah.
teams in there outside of Pick North. Obviously, who they took the loss to, so it makes sense there. And man, I gotta tell you, like those first two sets, it felt so right to have Downsword at one. Like it made perfect sense. I mean, it was not even a competition. And I think third set it was like 23-19 Thomas and just couldn't close it out. And it's like, man, I don't know. It was such a turnaround, but it felt so correct up until that point. And then all the GCL teams had to win out and make us look as silly as possible. I will say, actually, that's another thing. I mean, it used to be, every single year, every single week the poll would come out. It was 1, 2, 3 was Excel or Mueller. In our entire
Yeah.
history as a podcast, I don't think this has happened yet.
No.
So that is something to consider. I mean, as much as we talk about parity and more clubs and more schools coming up, it's at the end of the day GCL 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Division Two, no real surprise. 1, 2. Obviously, McNick Fenwick. I don't think we need to talk too much about that. That the Watterson loss to the Sales throws kind of a wrench in things. I think we interpreted it a little bit differently. What I came back to that I just couldn't get over was the fact that Watterson swept St. Charles. And
Sure.
I don't know, it's tough for me to drop them a whole lot more. I don't know that it's easier for me to say that was kind of a fluke loss than for me to say I don't know. I feel like they're a better team than that. I now obviously it gives a lot of credit to the sales. I just don't think it drops Watterson down that much. But I do think St. Charles at 3 makes sense. Watterson at 4. So St. Charles obviously right there with Fenwick losing them in 5. Mount Vernon beating St. Vincent St. Mary. So we both have them above St. Vincent St. Mary. I'm curious to hear where Firestone went for you. What do you think about Firestone?
Yeah, I mean, Firestone was right on that edge for me, and I
Sure.
think the biggest thing that kind of shoved them away from the top 10 was the fact that Loveland's just really good. I
Yeah.
think some of us have forgotten that Loveland, again, a team that did fairly well, again, didn't really trouble that much, but they were, at around the 10 seed, 8 seed level in Division 1 and Region 4 specifically. They're now in Division 2, and they're
Hmm.
getting those wins in now what is now meaningful matchups for them. So they're doing a really good job. I mean, credit to what the Tigers have done out in Loveland. So I think that's where I kind of sort of say, what, Loveland's done a little bit better
Hmm.
than Firestone. They've had a little bit more impact wins, if you will. They've been a bit more consistent versus Firestone.
Sure. For me, I got to look back at the fact that Firestone beat St. Vincent St. Mary in 5. And then obviously St. Vincent St. Mary came back, beat them again in 4. So they're 1-1 in the series. But I don't know. I got to think they're fairly even. But outside of that, not a whole lot else of discrepancy in Division 2. All right, that'll do it for this week. Mahir, any final thoughts?
I mean, first off, great to see you.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
Great to
you
be in
too.
person again. And again, we talk about this so many times when we're at the state tournament in Wittenberg that
Mhm.
it's great to meet up. It's great to interact with you guys. And again, a lot of club teams, even from Ohio, out
Yep.
here in the Valley of the Sun. So it's another great weekend and another great week of volleyball coming up.
Ohio State ranked 1 in the state. Or sorry, 1 in the country right now. So actually, I was telling someone
Yeah.
like, if it's not us, I wouldn't mind them going and winning it all. And he was like, "Shut up." And I'm like, "Okay, oh well." The Ohio love does not always come from people outside of Ohio.
Sure.
But anyway,
That makes sense.
with that, this has been Ohio Volley Talk. First time in person, and we will
Yeah.
catch you next week.